It's so inspirational. So
Yeah.
it's actually so true, and it's so inspirational. And I see Gen AI developers saying, "Oh, the LLM is bad," and I've seen this anti-pattern even within this. People take it. I
Yeah.
have this prompt which is like so long, and definitely it becomes hard for the LLM. And I guess that's one thing that you're trying to also make a part of it. Not have this one big magical prompt and then it will solve the problem. Would that
Yeah.
be a way of understanding?
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I know it. The quote you're relating to when I'm saying that, a lot of time when you write a huge prompt, what you're trying to do is system one thinking. You're trying
NASA.
to. So I definitely think that building good prompts is important. You can basically embed knowledge, like this, like people that are skilled in the art in a specific task. They can able to generate a very good prompt to the LLM, but we think that the same skills, instead of trying to put everything in one prompt, and then if it doesn't work, you blame the LLM because, hey, you gave it all the instruction that you could. What we suggest is design a flow and take your skills and your understanding of the problem and into small steps where each step has lower variance for a mistake. By the way, there is like a problem with what I'm saying. I'm going to talk about it. But if what you're trying to do is like give an amazing brain, amazing instruction, but then giving that brain one try to get it right, you probably do less good than taking these instructions and guiding it through questions and that are smaller, that are more digestibles. Take your huge prompt and define it as steps that you want to guide the LLM, and then eventually there's a very good chance that LLM will get like a better result as human. Like think about it, how many times like so many times we were in an engineering discussion where somebody comes up with a solution, and then just by asking 5 questions or so, you immediately like cover like better solutions or problems, etc. Why didn't that person like come up with it already? Because the fact that we're doing step by step abstraction like really helps like the mind, even if it's an LLM, to think about it. No, the problem is somebody could claim that, let's say that if you give it an amazing prompt, then it has 60% to be accurate. Forget about the exact number, just but if you give it in one inference, but if you break it into 5 steps, let's say that each step is like 90% accurate. Still, reaching to the end, in order to be accurate, it's 0.9 in the fifth in order to be accurate, and then maybe that's lower than 0.6 eventually. So hey, Tamar, that's bullshit. What you just said. The thing is, right? It's a important notion to think about, and that's why it's very important to how you define the flow. Similar to a bit to how, as a human developer, you would do that. You would think about each step, but you might come back to the previous step if some of the step failed. If a test failed, so you would say, oh, so maybe I need to come back here, or I need to fix the test, etc. So you need to consider that you can recover back from the
Ah,
steps, and this way, like to get your final result. But if you try to recover from a full huge prompt, usually it's hard to do. And basically, if you will, it's kind of actually designing a flow that I think it's not like it's hard to digest. If the LLM tries to do everything at once, if it fails, usually it's hard to recover. If you're trying to break it to small things, and the last tip that we give is that you can also propagate information to the next steps. Like if you can, for the step number 4, you can still give the original instructions, and you can even
okay.
design the prompt there, like, hey, if your result is conflicting with the original instruction, try to think about it, etc. So in the paper we give some advice on how not to fall into this trap of of probability, that as you progress, the probability to get a mistake is actually worse than a full one prompt. We give some advice on not how to fall on that and eventually get much better results in one single prompting.
In the Discord, I'll give you a prompt. You can share me the link to the paper. So when I get a newsletter out, I make sure I
Yeah,
don't
of
miss
course.
the news. I guess as I'm hearing you, it goes back to the beginning of my career. I've been 25 years writing code. It starts off with something as simple as, why do you need a multi-phase commit? Why do you need a well encapsulated object orient where one object does one thing and you have many objects? Then we will move on to microservices where one microservice one does one thing. It's kind of so interesting that once with Gen AI, when I hear you, I think let's go back to the basics. Let's have it modular. Let's have it well defined. Each one is very clear, and take one step and do your engineering around that, so that eventually when it comes together, the sum of all accurates gets you much better results itself, rather than one big block of code, one stored procedure with 100 SQL lines getting the job done.
Yeah.
It's
But by the
it's
way,
very,
um, yeah, by the way,
yeah,
let me
go.
give you like a example from a different world. Maybe
Okay.
you're familiar with this supposedly good best practice that people practice in Amazon, where before each meeting you need to come with like a 6 pages of what are we going to discuss. So let's think about that as the prompt, right?
Okay.
Everyone are reading a huge prompt, and then let's say that after they read everything, they need to make a decision in 1 minute, even if they got the best prompt of the 6 minutes of the 6 pages that they need to read. You know what I'm referring to? Like in Amazon, like before each meeting, in order to make the meeting efficient, or many meetings or some type of meeting, they need to make the meeting efficient. The owner of the meeting needs to send like a 6 pages with all the background and how they what decision they want to make, etc. And then let's say after that, people need to read it like in the first 10 minutes, and then they start discussing. Let's say that instead of discussing, they need immediately to make a decision. Yes, that the fact that all the context was being brought, and the fact that these 6 pages would be well designed, right? Like that's the prompt engineering, would definitely help the meeting. But still, you'll probably want to have a process of making decision, and like letting people like think about it out loud, and working through it. And that's the same thing like with programming, whatever. The LLM is not as capable to just get a full prompt and like just shoot out like a. And by the way, if one day I'm going to be wrong, I think it's because the architecture of the LLM is going to be iterative internally, and
Okay.
like inside, when it's going to be like a giga of I don't know, like 100 times bigger than the LLM today, including loops inside or something. Maybe we could avoid like designing it ourselves, although I think even there probably it will be good like to keep it human, because you could put guardrail, etc. But yeah.
I think that's a great metaphor. I think this is what happens within the when you go into neuroscience. There are multiple perspectives or aspects of the brain comes in, and when you have three different people, you have a zillion neural networks working on the same perspective. And I think you're trying to get that science into what we do as a flow engineering itself. Now,
Right.
this kind of to get to this, and just like I mean, I had this joke, right, where we used to, when SOA came and I used to have architecture meetings, and then I'd say, what is service oriented architecture? Somebody will stand up to tell something, okay? And I'll say, hold, wait a minute. I just want you to make sure one thing. In this room, you can tell an opinion, but I want one other person to agree with you that that is SOA.
Yeah,
So it's like
totally.
it's like what is object oriented or what's modular is itself, it's not one single thing, it's a confluence of multiple things coming together. So that kind of needs both a people change, mindset change, and a process change as well.
Yeah.
um, how do you recommend or look at that from a flow engineering? It's when somebody has to do flow engineering using your product or some other product. But flow engineering is not just about using a product, it's a way of
Yeah.
thinking and doing. What would be the key aspects of how people who want to do flow engineering, what do they team to look like? How should the teams, I know I'm getting a little bit, well, how should I call it, religious over here, on what's the people, what's the role, what should be the rituals, how do you visualize that?
Okay, I think the entire concept of flow engineering is that you have someone in the team that is skilled in the art, in the problem that and the data that you want to solve. Without that, it's
Okay.
going to be hard for you to do prompt engineering. For example, I can talk about software development. It's the easiest. Okay, like I actually talked
Okay.
about how we engineer the flow that tries to repeat, to copy, to mirror how developers would address a problem, a competitive like a problem, programming problem. But let's take instead, like let's say that you're building a product for doctors, for physicians. You want to give them
Okay.
an option to Q&A, to do a Q&A in front of a chat. So one way is to use ChatGPT. At the moment, through to January, sorry, June 24, it's basically doing system one thinking. It's like building on the fact that the LLM is very knowledgeable and intelligible to some extent, and spitting after a question and answer. But a flow engineering would say, okay, let's involve a physician and ask him, how would you use an LLM, and also all the options that are available for you in the world to to manually, sorry, building an answer. And that physician will probably tell you, look, here is my sources of information, guidelines.
Okay.
By the way,
Mm.
guidelines are changing all the time. Date websites, other websites with our website of our hospital, of how we use the guidelines, etc. And now when I get a call from another doctor to help, I would take that, use ChatGPT to get some ideas. I would then compare them in front of the guidelines, see which of them actually fits the best for the guideline. And then I would actually check where the doctor is checking. In this hospital, I would fetch the information from there, and I would, etc. And there would be a flow that you can now program, and then your solution will be much more valuable. I believe extremely more valuable, maybe even usable, which I don't think otherwise. ChatGPT, if you ask me, it's risky even. But this process would help the solution that was built on a GPT to be grounded, to be thoughtful, to give like a better explanation about the decision, to personalize, like, and that could be made if you bring a skill of the art person, in this case a physician, to work together with an engineer to build the solution. So the mindset should be, you want to think flow engineering, think about how the most professional skill in
Ah,
the art person would do that task, and try to repeat the flow that person, try to engineer that flow that person would do. Ideally, even bring that person into the conversation, into the company, into your project, at least for conversation, to learn. That's the mindset.
perfect. I think I've been in enterprise architecture and solution architecture, and one of the biggest problems which I see is there is a huge misalignment between what the business wants and what the IT wants. And we've been talking for decades that business and IT should be in sync with each other. And then came DevOps. And then we managed to screw up DevOps by making it a purely an IT thing, and business has nothing to do with DevOps. There are some companies who do that, but
Yeah,
vast majority of them, DevOps is an IT problem. The business has nothing to do with it. So
yeah,
that promise also went into thin air. Okay. But from what you are telling, I understand that flow engineering is also about aligning this, the Gen AI piece, and with the business or the real world. There's a real
totally.
world and then there's a LLM world. Flow engineering about is bringing a tango between them such that there is a good balance between both.
Perfect.
And I think so there's a lot of promise. I think I'm really curious to read that paper. It's just like you doing it in software engineering. I think every business domain, every business flow, there's a lot of promise that needs to be done to do that. Otherwise we will end up with a glorified rag application is what people would have at
Yeah,
the end of a day. I
I
think
agree.
that was a fantastic point on how we can. I mean, it just sets my mind on fire. I'm really curious to read the uh, paper. And one of my things is I'm a little greedy also. How do I take it to other domains where,
Yeah,
at least in software, people can appreciate that. But then other industries, they either do a Russian roulette. Oh, Genie worked well. We tried it. It gave 80% answers wrong or 70% answers wrong. It doesn't work for us. Throw the baby with the bathtub kind of scenario happening. I think it was great. Thanks, Itimer. Lot of insights. Looking forward to reading your paper, and we'll keep in touch. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much for having me here, Kumaran.
Okay. Have a good day.